This is David Wiggins from George Mason University. I'm a member of the National Academy of Kinesiology with the number 483. And I'm talking this morning with Dick Magill from New York University. Dick was elected to the National Academy of Kinesiology in 1987 and has the number 317. Dick, thanks for joining me this morning. I want to start out by asking you this. Just give me a brief rundown, if you will, of what you consider the highlights of your educational and professional career.
Well, the first thing that I really want to emphasize is how important it was when I finished my PhD at Florida State, because it completely changed my, whole direction. I had come out of actually an undergraduate degree in theology, which I found out as I went through I wasn't interested in pursuing. Went into physical education at Temple, master's degree, and I decided I didn't want to be a PE teacher. So I got an opportunity to get a PhD at Florida State in motor learning. And so that was a significant highlight of my career. And then following that, I was, my first post-PhD job was at Texas A&M, which was significant because it actually had a doctoral program, and which put me right into interacting and working with doctoral students. My first doctoral student there that is now Academy member, Gil Reeve. And so that's where we established not only a sort of a advisor-student relationship, but what has turned out to be a long-time personal and professional relationship. And then after 4 years there, I moved to Louisiana State University and ended up really at the behest of Dr. Jerry Thomas, another Academy member, who had just taken over as the department chair there and encouraged me to come in and help start a motor learning program. I ended up spending 29 years there and then officially retired from there about 9 years ago and then came to New York. So I think those are the primary highlights.
Why, I'm curious as to why you decided to go from Temple to Florida State. Was there one person at Florida State that you wanted to work under, or is there a number of faculty that attracted you to that institution?
Well, after I finished Temple, I was teaching in a small college in outside of New York City, and it was a small liberal arts college. It had a fairly good-sized and reputable PE department, and I realized as I was in that with a master's degree I was limited in what it was I could teach, and it was mostly activity classes, and if I wanted to teach more theory-oriented classes I needed a PhD. And we had a faculty member there who had a connection with somebody at Florida State and was going to go visit that person and ask if I wanted to go visit. So I did, and that's when I met Bob Singer and thought, okay, of all the options that were there for PhD specializations, that he would be the person I would want to work with in the motor learning area was what I was most interested in. So I never had a lot of other interest in other areas that they offered, such as exercise physiology and so on. So basically, I went there to be in the motor learning program.
And you were happy with that decision?
Very, yeah. It turned out to be a turning point in my whole, not only career, but just life in general.
Okay. Dick, you were elected to the National Academy in 1987, as I mentioned previously. And when I went through the list of the various people that were elected that year, it's very, very impressive. you know, people like Kirk Curriton, Don Franks, Mike Maxid, Carl Newell, William Haskell. If you go down that list, it's a pretty impressive one. What are your memories of those individuals? Do you that you were inducted with in 1987? Were all of those folks good friends of yours? Do you have professional relationships even to this day with those folks?
No, not all of them. Actually, a couple of them who stand out as I look back on it, and I've stayed in contact with, and who were, well, Don Franks, who eventually became my department chair at LSU, and so he was a very influential person in my career. But another one, of course, you mentioned Carl Newell, who's the current Academy president. I guess the memory I have of Carl, especially at that time, was, you know, we had both completed our PhDs around the same time, and even at that, you know, as young assistant professors, he stood out among, you know, many in the motor learning, motor control world, and I always regarded him with awe as a very outstanding scholar, and so, you know, he definitely was one who I remember from that class. Maybe this is a little bit overkill on this, but my next question would be this: what early leaders in the field most affected your career? Can you mention some of those folks? Well, I think first off, my major professor at Florida State, Bob Singer. He taught me a lot about just thinking about research and its role, and how to do research, and how to write. He was an excellent writer, and one of the things he emphasized in his doctoral program was getting all of us to write. And he was, you know, he did extensive editing of what we wrote. So he was a definite influence. When I moved to Texas A&M, a person who really had an influence on me was not at A&M, but was at University of Texas Austin, Juanine Sperduso, who's been very active in all kinds of academy things. Sure. And I had met Juanine at some conferences when I was a doctoral student. So when I got there, you know, it's like a 2-hour drive to Austin, and I got in touch with her, and she quickly invited me over, and, you know, to visit, and spent time, you know, seeing the lab, talking about our own research interests. And, you know, what that generated was, I think, both a professional and personal friendship relationship that has existed to today. So that's 40 years worth of interaction. And I've always looked at Juanine as somebody who had a big influence on me because of just the way she thinks and operates. Another person who influenced me, I'd like to mention, I did a sabbatical in 1986 and went to UCLA primarily to work with Dick Schmidt, and who unfortunately passed away this past year. But that turned out, I was there for one semester, and that turned out to be a really significant impact on me. Just being around him and getting an idea of how he thinks and works. So I've always attributed a lot of influence on the way I work to that period of time with Dick. Plus, he was the editor of Journal of Motor Behavior for my very first research publication. So, and he really handled that whole situation very well. And so that was my initial influence from him. And let's see, if I can add one more to the list, is George Stelmach, who I had a really good opportunity to interact with on several occasions, and just his way of thinking and operating influenced me. So I'd say those four people had, there are probably others, but I just can't, single out any others.
Okay, that's terrific. Let me ask you this, Dick, as a follow-up. I'm curious as to why you chose to teach and conduct research in the area of kinesiology, for which you are best known.
I think the best answer to that is that while I was in my master's program at Temple in physical education, I went to Temple in physical education because I had an opportunity to teach physical education and coach wrestling and baseball in a small college in Philadelphia. And I just really was interested in the whole process of coaching and teaching people sports skills and preparing them for competition and that type of thing. So it just seemed like just to pursue a better understanding of those kinds of things related. So it's a sports PE background that I think that directed me into looking at and going into this field and to teach and research in it.
So many people in the field of kinesiology, or maybe I should say many people in the field of kinesiology, had an athletic background. When you mentioned coaching and physical education, I'm also curious, were you a participant? Were you an athlete yourself?
Yes. I participated in wrestling and baseball, two sports that I ended up coaching eventually. So yes, I was.
Did you play, so you played at the high school as well as college level?
Yes.
Next question, a little bit broader in nature. What do you believe, Dick, were the major turning points in kinesiology? In the previous discussions I've had and interviews I've had through leaders in the field, seemingly everyone mentions Franklin Henry's classic article in 1964 on physical education and academic discipline. Is that something that you think of? Is that a turning point that you would mention, or are there other things that have taken place in kinesiology over the last 34 years that you think have been extraordinarily significant to our field?
Well, I definitely look at Franklin Henry's article as being influential. But I would also mention a few other things that I was trying to think of what some of those were. And clearly in the motor learning, motor control world, I think a primary influence in the mid-1970s was the introduction of Dick Schmidt's schema theory. I mean, that really influenced a lot of people, and the way of thinking about skills and how we control and learn skills was strongly influenced by that theory, and it generated just lots and lots of research, which is what a good theory should do. Mm-hmm. And then I think another turning point was not long after that, there was the advent and promotion of an alternative to his theory that's now is known as the dynamical systems theory. I think that was a major turning point because it got people thinking about other ways of looking at the control and learning of skills. Another one that I think is sometimes overlooked, but I consider it an important turning point, is during the 70s and 80s, the whole physical rehabilitation community started to see motor learning as a strong basis for the interventions that they operate or use for rehabilitation. And a lot of that came from some of the work by Carolee Winstein at Southern California, who I got to know quite well when I was on sabbatical at UCLA. She was a doctoral student of Dick Schmidt's at the time. But that has really had a major impact. In fact, I now teach a few motor learning course at Teachers College and at Columbia, and the whole week there are a lot of physical therapists, occupational therapists who are in their master's and PhD programs, and they all look back to this time when motor learning was, people maybe took a course in it, but they never saw it as a theoretical basis for addressing what they do. And so I look at that as a significant turning point.
Are you pleased with the direction of the research that's being conducted in motor learning? Do you think is there some really significant advances being taken place?
I'd say in general there have been ups and downs, I guess, pendulum swings from more focus on theory and on more application to practice. And so I think there is a much more right now an interest in looking at skill acquisition and practice conditions. How do we best help people acquire skills and prepare them to perform those skills in whatever situation they have to perform them in? And I think that's a really good direction, because it helps to tie together theory and practice, which I've always been very interested in doing. And so I think there is a good, strong direction in that, and I hope the field continues in that direction rather than going to one side or the other of the theory applied approach to research.
Dick, like everyone else in the National Academy of Kinesiology, you have a very long curricular vita, and you've published extensively. You published a number of scholarly articles. You've also published a number of books. I wanted to ask you, are there any articles, any books that you've done that you are particularly proud of, that you're just pleased with and think that have made significant advances in the field?
For articles, I would have to single out one that I did early on with one of my doctoral students from LSU, Tim Lee, who's an International Academy Fellow. And it was based on on what's called contextual interference. And that article really has had some impact. It's been cited very highly. And so that's one part of it. And then related to that, I had another doctoral student who was interested in contextual interference, and Kelly Hall, who's at Cal State Poly Bispo, SLO, I guess they call it.
Yes.
And she and I put together a review of research literature, and that was published and has been really heavily cited, and I still find people citing it. So even though it's 30, 40 years old. And so that is one I'm very proud of and pleased with the reception it received. And on the book side of things, I guess I have to say the one that I'm most pleased with is the textbook that I put together. Actually, while I was first time was Texas A&M, and I developed it because I couldn't find a textbook I was particularly pleased with for teaching introductory undergraduate class in motor learning. And so that was the impetus behind that, and it has been very successful in terms of, I still can't go and buy my Mercedes yet, but but it is used a lot, actually around the world. And if whenever I travel internationally, that's perhaps the one thing I seem to be known for more than anything else, is that textbook. So, in fact, I just took on a co-author, Dave Anderson, who's a recent Academy Fellow, and we're just coming out now with the 11th edition. So, that's something I feel quite pleased with.
Well, if it's through the 11th edition, then it's obviously been, it has a long shelf life. That's for sure. Dick, another question. What is your hope for kinesiology going forward? Any recommendations that you might have for the field of kinesiology? Just could you talk a little bit about that?
I hope that in this age of fitness and all of that, that the field doesn't lose sight of the importance of understanding the whole process of skill acquisition and the role it plays in just people's daily lives, in addition to not just being a sport-related kind of research endeavor. So, if anything, I hope that kinesiology maintains a focus and connection to the whole area of skill acquisition and motor skill performance.
I'm also, I didn't mention this to you previously, but I am curious. You mentioned to me that you retired from LSU after 29 years.
Right.
You made your way to New York University. Could you just talk a little bit about what brought you to New York University, and and how you are spending your time now?
Well, what brought me to New York University was I had remarried or married a woman who was teaching at Teachers College, and then took a job at NYU. And after we got married, we tried a long distance relationship, and it just was not what we wanted. So I was eligible to retire, so I just decided, well, she has a job, I'm eligible for retirement, so I'll take my retirement and move to New York, and let's just see what happens. As it turns out, I was offered a visiting professorship at NYU, and did that for 3 years, and then was offered a department chair position for 3 years, did that, and then when that term was up, I sort of retired again. So what I'm doing now, yeah, 2 times retired. But what I'm doing now is part-time teaching. So I don't have a research agenda going on, although I've still got writing that I'm doing. But I'm teaching some courses both at NYU and now at Teachers College, Columbia, and so that is real. So I teach about one course a semester at each place. So that keeps me occupied.
Well, it must be just such a different culture. You go from LSU with a fairly large number of faculty and a large number of PhD students. At NYU, I assume you're not working with PhD students. Am I right about that?
Right. In fact, there's not even a department of kinesiology there.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah. They, somewhere along the line, they had one of the leading physical education departments in the country at one time, and then they eliminated it.
Yeah.
But they did develop a physical therapy department, which has asked me to help, to do some teaching in. So that's been good. And they have some PhD students, so I work with them. And then at Teachers College, I've been working closely with a few PhD students. So, I've been able to keep my hands in that side of things. So I'm not completely divorced from that aspect of the profession.
Dick, just maybe one more and possibly two more questions for you. From those, one more time, for those I've interviewed in the past for Leaders Speak, many of them talk about the influence that their family had on their professional careers, mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers. Could you talk a bit about what influence that your parents had on your life or professional career, or maybe even siblings?
Well, parents, I came from a very blue-collar world in sort of central western Pennsylvania. My father worked as a boilermaker on the railroad and had never gone to college, and he always said that was his major regret, that he never went to college, and he wanted as a goal for his own children that they all go to college. So the influence from him was that he just really wanted to make sure that I went to college. And the other influence was he was a big sports fan, and so he was very supportive of me being involved in sports. And so I think I certainly picked up the interest in sports through his interest and his promotion of my being involved. So beyond that, it was just good parental support for doing whatever I wanted to do, and they supported me all the way through.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had a sister who who actually was 2 years young, or is 2 years younger than me. She went to college, became a public school teacher, elementary school teacher. She lives outside in suburban Chicago, where my mother now lives. My father passed away in 1978. I had a brother who unfortunately was killed in an automobile accident when he was 21, and so that was siblings wise. I have one.
Okay. And at first, last question, I promise.
Okay.
So at one time, you took your bachelor's degree in theology. Did you have ambitions to be in a church, to be a minister? Was that an initial career objective of yours?
I think it was. That's probably the main reason I went to a theology type school was that. But what dissuaded me from going that route was I actually had a roommate in college whose father was a pastor of a very large church, and I used to go visit my roommate in his family in northern New Jersey, and so hanging around them and in that environment, I said, this is not for me. So I decided to look elsewhere, and I had the opportunity to go to coach, and in that particular case, wrestling, and decided that that was much more interesting to me. So I kind of switched gears and went in the physical education direction.
Okay. I lied. I'm going to ask you one more question now.
You are a historian, right?
Well, I must tell you, I do like personal stories. That's for sure. That's the historian coming out of me. But
right.
It's very, very impressive. The folks that have come out of LSU. And I did not realize, maybe you had mentioned this before, but I did not realize that Gil Reed was he your first doctoral student?
Yes.
Okay.
He was already in the doctoral program when I got there, and the person who was advising him really didn't have much of a research background or interest in what Gil was interested in. When I came on board, our interests clicked very nicely, and so they allowed me to kind of take over advising him through his research and dissertation process. So, that worked out extremely well. And then he actually, after he finished his PhD, stayed there for a year. And so that's where I think really connected. But
and am I right that isn't Gil back at LSU now?
He is back at LSU, but he was at A&M, not LSU.
That's right. That's right. Okay, that's right.
For his doctorate.
That's right.
Yeah, he's back at LSU now. He came there just before I left. We had one interesting experience, just as an anecdote here. In my last year there and his first year there, he was chair of kinesiology, and but it was also a member of the motor learning faculty. And I had my last doctoral student there, who was a physical therapist, and she was coming in from New Orleans on a regular basis. And so when it came time for her to have her dissertation defense, Gil was part of her committee. So what we noted at the defense was, here in this room was my very first doctoral student and my very last doctoral student.
Wow.
So that was pretty special. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, have most of your PhD students, have they gone on to careers in academia, or have they become physical therapists? Where have most of them gone?
Well, they've all gone into academia. I can't think of anyone who didn't. Even those who were physical therapists ended up in university positions. So in one way or another, they all ended up in academia.
Very nice. So that must really give you a sense of fulfillment. And
right. Plus, well, the good thing too was they all got jobs. That's definitely a fulfillment.
And that does not always happen. That's for sure.
No, it doesn't. No. So that was all. I always consider that a really positive thing.
Absolutely. Well, Dick, thanks so much. I think I've run out of questions.
Okay. Well, this has been most interesting, and I really appreciate your selecting me to talk to you in this kind of environment.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been an enjoyable experience for me to do these Leader Speak interviews, Dick. I've done some very good folks, and I had a wonderful interview with Chuck Corbin, for example. Wayne or Jerry Thomas was a lot of fun to talk to, not surprisingly.
Right.
And Scott Kretschmeyer, Roberta Park, and Juanine Sperduzzo.
Yeah.
And the one I did just previously to our talk today, I talked to Joe Seyfried for
I just
a while.
listened to that one. I've always had a high level of respect for her, so it was really interesting to hear her talk about some of her background, a lot of which I didn't know about, so that was very enlightening.
Well,
let me just put in, just as a final thing, maybe put in one plug for the Academy.
Sure.
I tried to tell new fellows this. I said, when they get inducted, is that the experience of being an Academy Fellow has been one of the real pluses of my career. And the primary thing is that it's the only meeting I go to, the only place I know where you can get people who are not trying to prove themselves, because they've already proven themselves. And so when somebody talks, it's not like they're promoting their own egos. They're really talking from a background of knowledge and experience, and that in that room there are going to be people who have similar levels of knowledge, and so the kinds of questions and discussions that occur there are so different from those that we go into these discipline-specific kinds of meetings. So I think the multidisciplinariness of the Academy has been one of the things I most appreciate, and so for anybody who's a new fellow who might listen to this, I hope they take that to heart and continue to support the Academy.
I could not agree with you more. It's actually the highlight of my year. It's the one conference that I must go to.
Yeah.
And I also love the camaraderie.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the chance to talk to folks
right.
from various disciplinary perspectives, and the level of respect and purpose. And so I think I could not agree with you more about that, Dick. That's for sure.
Well, good. I appreciate that. Okay.
Have a great day, Dick, and again, thanks so much.
Thanks, David. All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.